show people this building. And we're going to talk about what's, again, more of what's special, what makes this a synagogue. But I hope that the most obvious thing that you've seen when you've come in here is this fantastic Aron HaKodesh, the Holy Ark. It's really, when I'm doing this with school groups, I say to them, it's really just a cupboard, but it's the most magnificent cupboard you will ever see in your life. And it's placed in the eastern wall so that we, when we're looking at it, are facing east. And does anyone have any idea why that might be?
Jerusalem.
Jerusalem. Because we haven't always had synagogues. The very first Jewish places of worship were in Jerusalem. There were 2 temples in Jerusalem. The first one was sadly destroyed. It was destroyed by the Babylonians during the course of a war. There was a new temple built, the second temple, and I have a photo here of a reconstruction of the second temple. I'll leave this line and you can have a look at it afterwards, but it was the biggest building in the world at the time, and a very magnificent building. And there is one part of that temple still left in Jerusalem at the Kotel, the Western Wall. Very often those who are not Jewish will call it the Wailing Wall, but we don't really like to call it that. It's in Jerusalem, and it's still a very holy site and holy place for Jewish people. So we like to face towards Jerusalem, where the first temples were, but sadly the second temple was also destroyed. And the Jewish people generally scattered the start of the diaspora that's left that has existed for so many years. And Judaism, the Jewish people had to think about other ways of interpreting their Judaism, putting it into practice, and where were they going to worship? Now the focus was no longer there in Jerusalem, and that's when synagogues were developed. But we still remember the temple and its central place in Judaism by facing towards the east. Okay. And what do we store in the Aron HaKodesh? Anyone know? Yeah, the Torah scrolls. And when I open that up for you to see, we can count from memory. I think we've got 7 Torah scrolls are in there. But we have one out here to let you see an example of what a Torah scroll looks like. Do you know about the Torah, is what I ask people. Do you know what the Torah is? Torah has a number of interpretations of what it means. It can mean the law, but by that, do you know what's contained within this scroll?
First 5. Go.
The 5.
The story.
The story. The story is contained in 5 books. We call them the 5 books of Moses.
Yes.
The 5 books are Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay? And without the Torah, really, Judaism is nothing, I would say. We don't need a fancy synagogue to worship in, but we do need the Torah because everything, they say, everything is in it. And it's the basis for how Judaism has developed over thousands of years. And do you know when we would read from the Torah in this synagogue?
Tuesday, Thursday, and Shabbos afternoon.
Yeah, exactly. Traditionally, the Torah is read on a Tuesday. On a Tuesday, I thought it was a Monday.
Maybe Monday. I was just thinking that
Yeah.
on a Thursday.
On a Monday and a Thursday and on a Shabbat. Okay. Shabbat is our main festival, and it happens every week. Do you know what Shabbat means?
7th day.
7th day, yeah.
That's the rest.
Day of rest. A day when you shall do no work, as set out in the Torah in several places. And it's the traditional day. In this synagogue, it's really only Shabbat when people come to the synagogue But if this was had a bigger congregation, was in a bigger community, then people would be coming here 3 days a week for the Torah scroll to be read from, and they would also, people would be coming here 3 times a day to pray. It doesn't happen in this synagogue, but definitely in every synagogue people will always be here on Shabbat. Do you know when Shabbat starts? What day of the week it is? I'm treating you like you know nothing.
Yeah, that's okay.
So, anyone got an answer? I've not said anything so far. Shabbat, what day of the week?
Friday.
Starts on a Friday.
So when the sun goes down?
Yes, basically. Because we look at our days a bit differently from the wider world or the wider community in Scotland. It actually comes from the very first book of Torah, Genesis, in the beginning, where it talks about the creation of the world, and it's actually specifically said at the end of the first day there was evening and there was day. So we think of a day as starting in the evening as soon as it gets dark, and it then goes through until the next day when it gets dark. So for instance, Sunday, we would think, if we were thinking in Jewish terms, we would think started yesterday evening when it got dark, Shabbat was finished, Sunday had begun, and Sunday will be over when it gets dark this evening. Okay. Again, we've mentioned Hebrew, and I have examples here of the Hebrew alphabet, which we call the alphabet, not so different. It is read differently from English. In English, we would read from left to right. In Hebrew, we read from right to left, starting with, and the alphabet starts with Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet. And we have vowels that look like this. There are a series of little strokes and dots and lines written under letters. And another interesting facet of Hebrew is that we don't have separate numbers, that the letters stand for numbers as well. So Aleph is 1, Beit is 2. And an interesting feature, I'll leave these out for people to look at afterwards if they'd like to. Another interesting feature of the Torah scrolls is there are no vowels in the Torah scroll, which usually mind boggles any visitor. So it's very difficult to read and takes years of training and learning to read. And it's very precious. Anyone know what it's made of? It's not just precious in terms of what it means to us, but it's precious in terms of how it's put together and constructed. It's not parchment. Parchment implies paper papyrus, as it were. So it could be goat skin. It's usually calf skin. So it's vellum that it's made of, and it's written by hand. It's written in panels that are sewn together. And it's with a quill, written by hand, with ink, with a quill. And if anyone makes a mistake while writing it, they have to dispose of that panel, put it to one side, and start again, because it should be perfect. And to try and keep it perfect, we try not to touch it with our greasy, dirty hands, so we use a yad meaning. Very good. Okay, and children love to see that there's a little hand with a pointy finger.
And we have one left-handed one.
Do you? I didn't know that, you see. You can always learn something. So, there's one left-handed yad in this synagogue. Excellent.
Good, because I'm a lefty.
Very good. Okay. So, just to talk a little bit more about the Torah scroll, we've said that it's the story, but it's actually a whole series of stories. I've said already what it starts with. Anyone got any ideas about what other stories are contained within the Torah? They're not actually in the Torah scroll. Prophets come later, after the period of the Torah. So the prophets are not in there, but we do have prophets. They're contained in another add-on, as it were, part of the Bible in other books of the Bible, that we would also always read a passage from the prophets when we're here on a Shabbat and when the Torah is being read, linked in prophets like. So you brought up prophets. Who are our prophets?
Moses is the first one, Miriam.
Well, Moses, I suppose Moses, the prophet, is in there. He's not always thought of as a prophet, but he's also a great leader.
The other prophets,
Yeah.
Amos and Ezekiel and
Yeah.
Isaiah.
Isaiah is the most famous and probably the most often read.
Deborah.
Deborah, very good. Okay.
He's a judge, not a prophet.
Sorry?
He's a judge, not a prophet.
Some people, yeah, she is a judge. Some people actually do include her in the, perhaps not in orthodoxy,
What about Miriam?
regard her. Miriam, well, again, there are differences of opinion within Judaism about that. Generally speaking, they're male prophets. But I'm glad you brought it up personally. Okay. So, what else is in here?
Stories. We have the Ark and the 40 days of rain. And we've got Cain and Abel. Loads of stories in there.
Yeah, okay. So the ones that other people might have heard of who are not Jewish and might identify with are Cain and Abel, certainly, that would be one. But even before Cain and Abel, we have the story of in amongst the creation story, a story about the creation of the first human beings is in the Torah. The first human beings being Adam and Eve. Other stories that you, I hope, would have heard of: Noah and the Ark, the Great Flood. Yes? Good. The very first Jewish person appears in the Torah. The very first Jewish person was not Adam. Thoughts? Abraham. Very good. And the huge story that's in the Torah is the story which features Moses, the story of the Jewish people having found themselves in the land of Egypt as slaves. And along comes Moses, who eventually is able to lead them to freedom, although it's a strange freedom to start with, the freedom to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, trying to get to the promised land, the land of Canaan, or the land of Israel, as we would call it now. And actually the Torah finishes with the death of Moses, looking to the promised land. He doesn't actually get to enter the promised land himself. Okay. So, but that's not all that's included in the Torah. What else is in there? The commandments, yeah. And that brings me to the 10 Commandments is the most famous. It's what everyone from out with Judaism would know about, which feature rules to live a just life, a life that's that makes things pleasant for everybody in the way that they treat each other. And if you want to look around, usually there is a representation of the 10 Commandments in a synagogue. Can anyone spot where they are in this synagogue? They're in the dome, yeah. So a wonderful feature in here is the fact that the 10 Commandments are represented as presented to Moses on the tablet of stone, represented in the windows here. But Judaism doesn't just have 10 commandments. How many have we got?
631.
613, yeah, absolutely. Which have all been pulled from the text of the Torah. You might not necessarily recognize when you're reading it that this is a commandment, but over the years, Judaism has developed and come to the conclusion there are actually 613 commandments in there, including the dietary laws, the laws of kashrut, which we can talk about. I understand you're going to be doing that another time, and if I were talking about it here, I would be talking about it down in the kitchen, because that always makes it seem more real to people to be in the kitchen with the different cupboards and cutlery and sets, etc., etc. Okay, so there are a lot of laws, a lot of dry stuff, I would say, particularly in Numbers and Leviticus, but it's all important. Okay, so anything else that, looking around the synagogue, would let you know that you are in a synagogue?